Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jess Rawasa, and I'm from the Philippines. I support the work at the GLF as a digital marketing and social media strategist, and it's wonderful to have everyone here today. Thank you so much for joining the third session of the GLF Asia Community and Action Digital Week, a digital gathering for deep and reflective conversations about Asia's communities, landscapes, and futures. This week is dedicated to critical reflection, collective hope, and care. Our shared goal is to imagine and forge pathways towards futures where safety and prosperity are rooted not in extraction or excess, but in the well-being of all life on Earth. Today's session is titled Asia Beyond Rice: How Can We Diversify Nutrition and Reduce Hunger? And for this conversation, we'll be exploring a powerful contradiction. Across Asia, we produce more than enough food to feed everyone in the region, yet hunger and malnutrition persist. Food systems are not just about yields or calories, but are deeply connected to culture, power, history, and identity. Crops have nourished generations across Asia, but industrial monocultures and what many call gastrocolonialism have narrowed what we grow and eat, sidelining biodiversity, ancestral food knowledge, and local nutrition. In the process, soils have degraded, food traditions have eroded, and livelihoods have become more fragile. In this session, we'll explore how moving beyond monocultures and beyond a single idea of what food should look like can help us build food systems that are more diverse, nourishing, and just. We'll look at how farmers, chefs, and communities across Asia are reviving underutilized crops, agroecological practices, and food cultures that nourish both people and landscapes. I'm really excited to hold this conversation with our incredible speakers today. We're joined by Sheikh Imran from India, a young agriculturalist, GLF 2025 Forest Restoration Steward, and founder of Prakriti Agrologics, an agroecology startup that advances agrobiodiversity, sustainable farming, and land restoration in India. We also welcome Tamtam from Indonesia, culinary content creator and food researcher who shares culinary stories to raise awareness on plant-based food biodiversification in India, on plant-based food biodiversification in Indonesia. Thank you so much for the time to join us in this space and for the work that you both do. So let's dive into this conversation. So for my first question, and I'll ask this to the both of you, when you think about the food system that you're a part of, what food, ingredient, crop, or farming practice from your context best captures the connection between biodiversity, culture, and nutrition, and why does it matter today? So I'm going to start with Imran. Uh, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jess. I think it's a good question to set the context and start on. But for me, a strong expression of biodiversity, culture, and nutrition is not just restricted to a crop or a system of farming, but I think for me, it's communities that build it, especially indigenous communities, or in India, what we call them as Adivasi communities or tribal communities. Because if you look at these communities, they are historically landless, economically excluded, often exploited for labor, and they've been migrating from one region to another. And many do not come from agricultural backgrounds either, and often resort to support from government programs or the different states that they enter. Yet, despite all the systemic exclusion and marginalization, we see that they follow very diverse food systems. They're foraging from all the crops around them. They're foraging mushrooms, they're foraging herbs, they're cultivating underutilized herbs, they're sustainably fishing, they're adopting tuber farming, they go to forest for collecting forest produce in a sustainable manner. And through all of this, you can see that they're integrating different elements of their local landscapes and all the resources available around them. And the same is reflected on their plates as well. And this is how they're nourishing their children. And this is how they are managing to feed and nourish themselves despite all the systemic exclusion. And why this is important is I think it represents a resilient food systems that we often talk about in global platforms, in news, in our textbooks, but we fail to build a system that actually supports communities to make this plate a reality, a diverse plate a reality. So I think with almost 50 to 55% of all the hungry people being in Asia, I think the resilience of our communities is what needs to take the spotlight and what needs to drive food systems transformation on the ground, in policy, in economic models, and beyond. I think this is what we need to be looking at even as consumers and be more aware about.
Thank you, Imran. And I find it so succinct the way that you placed it. I do agree that when we talk about food systems, we have to bring it back to the heart of who it's actually serving, right? It's serving the people. And I really appreciate how you brought communities back to the center of food systems conversations. Let's ask Tam now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Indonesia is really hard to narrow down to like few simple certain ingredients or even system. It is we are a very mega diverse country, but I've prepared some like answers that perhaps can capture all the interconnection between culture and also sustainable food system. One being coconut. Coconut is very has a very strong connection to our culture. That being said, I think our culture and our philosophy in everyday livelihood of Indonesians are strongly tied to the philosophy of a coconut tree, as well as like other island nations. Coconut trees are resilient. They are very resourceful. Not even a single part of its tree is wasted. So therefore, coconut has a very strong connection to our everyday philosophy in Indonesia. But other than that, I can also say that millet, or as we call it, jawawut, is a strong, also has a strong connection to our culture. Um, the name millet in Indonesian is jawawut, and that is actually where the name Java is from, or as we call it, Jawa. That Jawawut or millet has a very strong connection to the Austronesian route, and it was brought to us like I'm guessing like 3,000 years ago from the Philippines and also from Taiwan. Um, Henceforth, Jawawut is always a big part of our ancestral diet, but then like rice came, so it is forgotten now, and now they are as feed to the birds. They are used as feed to birds, and the ones who are still consuming jawawut now are deemed as poor. And yeah, Jawawut has a very strong connection to Javanese, especially, but also, I mean, Indonesia is not just Java. There's also Papua, on the other hand, who has a completely different biodiversity than the western side of Indonesia. And the one crop that best describes the Papuanese culture is sago. Unlike other crops or carbohydrate crops, sago is a plant that is grown naturally in the wetlands and forests. So it has a very strong connection to Papuanese culture. It is used as rituals very often, and it is more like an identity to the community in Papua. So yeah, these three are, I guess, what best describe our culture and the interconnection between the food system and the culture and ancestral knowledge.
Thank you, Tam Tam. And I found it so beautiful when you mentioned that there are certain crops or certain food items that are also used across, like across different practices. Food isn't just used simply for like nourishment or consuming, but
Yeah,
can also be utilized for rituals or for gatherings. It holds cultural symbolism for different cultures around the world. And I find it also so striking when you say that Indonesia has such a vast and diverse food system culture or gastronomic culture, and the same can be said for so many different parts of the world.
yeah,
I realized that I asked a very impossible question of,
yeah,
asking what certain, what certain crop or what certain ingredient, but I think that you and Imran answered it super beautifully.
thank you so much.
Let me go then to my next question. From both of your perspectives, what is one assumption about food systems in Asia that needs to be challenged or unlearned? So I feel like this is uh, yeah, I feel like this is a little bit of I won't say a difficult question, but I know that it's something that every one of us within, the food system space does think about critically. So I'm going to flip the question order and start with Tam Tam. What do you feel needs to be challenged or unlearned?
I think it's pretty clear. I think that's also our main topic here is our interdependency on rice. That is a big thing, I think. Not only, well, not only for the sake of our cultural identity, but also towards a more sustainable and diverse food system in the future. I guess it's um it's a thing that has been lost in our culture since the colonization, or I guess way before that. Rice has taken over our food culture for thousands of years, and it makes us wonder what were the main crops and main carbohydrates before rice, and two being the ones that I mentioned before, millet and rice, but there's like hundreds of thousands of other diverse carbohydrate that most countries in Asia has. And yeah, I think that is one, our interdependency on rice, but also in the context of Indonesia and Malaysia, I think palm oil plantation is also a very destructive system that we have, which also doesn't only connect to food system, but also, forestry and also, climate change and I mean, palm oil is used in many things, not just food. But it is really hard to tackle this issue because 80% of Indonesians are actually dependent on, no, wait, no, that's not right. A huge amount of percentage of Indonesians are actually dependent on palm oil plantations for their source of income. And it's hard to tackle this. I think that's our biggest issue. And one of the biggest tragedy that we had, which happened like 3 months ago, we had a huge flooding that killed more than 1,000 Sumatran across North Sumatra and West Sumatra and also Aceh. It is a really devastating problem that we're facing and that we need to tackle it as soon as possible. But yeah, those two are the things that we need to unlearn, I think. Hello?
No, that's sorry. No, what really struck me about what you said is about our dependence on rice because I do feel like it's going to be such a difficult thing for Asian countries especially to unlearn, considering that rice has taken up so much of our own culture, our own modern day culture. And now I am thinking about how much of that traditional knowledge, what you mentioned, what other staple crops that we used to get into have been lost because of exactly what you mentioned, like the centuries of colonization, especially within our region. So I'd love to hear more about that later if we still have some time within the
Sure.
session. Cool. Now I want to bring it back to Imran. What do you feel needs to be challenged and unlearned, or unlearned in our food systems in Asia?
Yes, yes. I think the number one priority to unlearn is that we need to industrialize and standardize our food systems. I think even in conversation, we talk about alternative foods, but we forget that these alternatives were once the mainstream for many, many communities across South Asia and Southeast Asia as well. I still travel a lot around rural India, and whenever I go and sit with farmers, we don't have rice, we have finger millet. We have this bowl made of finger millet, and we have it with a local fish and local chili. And in my travels, when I've been to the northern Himalayan region of India, people make a juice out of rhododendron flowers. So again, something which we never learn about in our conventional food systems. Um, and at the same time, I work in the state of Kerala, which is full of jackfruit everywhere. And jackfruit is a staple in cooking, in desserts, and even as a snack. You just take a jackfruit off the tree and you eat it. So there are so many options which we now unfortunately label as alternatives, but for communities on the ground, these are essential for survival every single day. And beyond survival, they are an important part of their culture, important part of their history, and they want to pass it down to their children as well. So that spirit is very much alive, but definitely not reflected in the way we conduct food systems, maybe on a national level in all of our countries. And I think this is where I want to break another assumption, is that I think the world believes that Asian farmers or farmers in Asia can't govern themselves or can't organize themselves into cooperatives and take up more agency for transforming food systems. I think this is something that needs to change very soon, because this is a justification by many financing agencies to not fund food systems transformation, citing that farmers are not accountable enough or can't govern themselves enough. So I think these two are very interlinked, and also the primary reason why, like Tam Tam just mentioned, rice is such a major um, industrial problem at the moment in our food systems.
I find that there are a lot of connections here between what you said, Imran, to what Tamtam has also mentioned. And I also appreciate how you brought it then again back to the farmers, because indeed, like the knowledge coming, the traditional knowledge coming from these communities still exist within these communities, and indeed giving them more agency and platforming them, being able for giving them the opportunities to share this knowledge, I feel is going to be very there is a word for this. It's going to be very conducive to like building a stronger and more resilient and more sustainable food system for us in Asia. So thank you both for starting us off with such incredible responses. Now let's dive further into this conversation. And I will start with Imran. So, Imran, your work with Prakriti highlights agroecology and soil health. Where do you see the tensions between industrial food systems and community-led alternatives, and how are those tensions being navigated on the ground? How do farmers or communities you work with find agency within a system that often prioritizes efficiency over diversity?
Yes. I think the major problem when it comes to industrial tension is, I'd like to explain this with an example. When I was working in landscapes that are primarily rice dependent, I used to work in Wayanad. And if I translate the word Wayanad, it means the hill of rice. So it's historically known for rice cultivation. But when you go on the ground and when you especially go to the markets and what farmers are cultivating, even rice is fighting against rice in the real landscape and the markets. And what I mean is, traditional rice varieties are diminishing, and hybridized, industrialized rice varieties are taking the center stage in the market. So, what this indicates is that maybe rice is not the issue here, but this industrial push behind single crop, monoculture, hybridization of this crop, and biofortification, and continuously building newer varieties as climate is changing. To make sure that they're resilient, but not solve the problem of soil health, not solve the problem of mitigating climate change, and not adapting to that, but just coming up with varieties that are resilient until maybe we run out of a practical way to do it. I think this industrial push is where the real problem lies, and maybe I'm afraid it can happen with any crop tomorrow if it's deemed to be in a very capitalistic interest of a country or a company to do so. So the real problem where the communities are unable to fight this is a lack of an enabling ecosystem. I think no matter how industrialized rice is, you will always find communities, especially smallholder farmers, growing underutilized crops, growing traditional rice varieties, growing tubers, especially in the region where I work. Tubers are especially important part of the culture, because it is linked to resilience, because this region had famine way back in many years ago, and it was tubers that saved the people. So we continue to still consume tubers as a source. So but the enabling ecosystem is simply not there. If a farmer grows traditional rice, he cannot sell it somewhere. If a women-led cooperative is growing tubers, there's no formal market for them to go and sell it. At the same time, from a policy perspective, there is no subsidy regime, or there is no minimum assured price for these underutilized crops and for these alternate crops that we have. So this really crushes farmers from all directions, from inputs, sustainable inputs not being available, from policy and financing not supporting procurement of these varieties, and from brands and industries driving away consumer interest to a more accessible form of nutrition through rice and through biofortification rather than diversifying crops, and from also a cultural food system perspective. I think farmers are crushed from all three sides, and it takes a lot of resilience and a lot of strength to be able to continue growing these crops. But I believe where the hope is still alive is even today when I work with farmers and they give in to rice cultivation, the hybrid rice cultivation, there is still a small patch in their farms where they're growing traditional varieties, where they're growing traditional herbs, tubers, which they share with their neighbors, which they feed their children, which they sometimes sell in unorganized markets. But the spirit and the biodiversity is still alive. But the challenge that is a question for all of us is how do we scale it up, and how do consumers who actually drive this market activity sitting in urban areas can actually be the beacons for increasing the demand. Because I believe if this demand increases, then maybe industries and the market system that we have will also transition towards diversification. But unfortunately, we live in a world of convenience, we live in a world of supermarkets, so we are yet to see our local markets flourish and also enter our homes and our plates. So I think this is a greater challenge, this enabling ecosystem that needs a lot of work from all of us as different stakeholders and as a society to work on, for which will directly impact farmers both economically and both and culturally as well.
Thank you, Imran. And indeed, like a lot of the challenges that we do see in our food systems today are heavily reliant on like the challenges with market demand and the way our value chains have been set up for our farmers and our communities. And I think that what you mentioned about this change of mindset, especially in like urban areas, what we deem as, food that we can enjoy eating on our plates, is something I think Tam Tam is also very knowledgeable on as a culinary content creator. So I want to bring my next question to him. Tam Tam, as a culinary content creator, how do you see food culture and everyday cooking play in shaping the food systems you're trying to protect or transform? And just to add like a little bit more on that, based on what Imran has mentioned, how do you feel like this could influence then your audiences in considering their food, or the food that they eat, or the food that they have on their plate?
Yeah, actually, Imran has a really great point, and that's also the point that I would like to point out. So I heard from a fellow food researcher of mine that's been researching about planetary health in Indonesian context, that the public's perspective and consumerism is the biggest challenge in order to transform our food system to a more sustainable food system. Like, although my contents are in English, but it also brings a big statement to the local community that our overlooked foodways are something that's highly precious in the global eyes. Like, I think that's what should answer your question. Although I am targeting the international audience, but I mean, Indonesians know, as just seeing my contents, it is something that, it is the food that I'm showcasing in my contents are the ones that are rare and also deemed less than, like, I guess, like any meat-based foods in Indonesia. And therefore, I am in a way uplifting the what so-called the poverty food, and it brings the message that there's not a single poverty food that we have. And this stigma is embedded issue that was brought through colonialism. If we can uplift these so-called poverty food to the public, then we're heading towards a sustainable food system, I guess. So yeah, that would be my answer.
I think it's super important that you mentioned that there is no such thing as poverty food. You know,
Yeah,
there are definitely certain types of dishes, let's say, in different cultures that people deem as like, oh, you eat that when you are in the rural areas, or you know, this is rural cuisine, or it is measured in, let's say, how much a dish costs at the market. You know, like
yeah,
if your ingredients are more expensive, then it's something that is valued at a higher price. But I do agree. I mean, like we've been talking about this in your different answers about how biodiversity exists in these communities, that there's value in
yeah,
you know alternative sources of nutrition, and I feel like through your content, especially Tam, you are able to package that so well for the international community and showcase that to your audiences. And again, like I feel like food culture and the landscape of social media today plays such a big impact on, you know, the consumer mindset on
yeah,
what our idea of food is supposed to be.
yeah.
So thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to pass the mic then again to Imran again. So from your experiences working in policy spaces, what does food diversity look like in practice at the community level? And how different is it from how diversity is discussed in policy spaces?
I think in the policy spaces, both domestic and globally, even if you go to the UNFCCC, the CBD, and the CCD, the common topic that often reoccurs in all three spaces and any space, as a matter of fact, is crop diversification and combating desertification through crop diversification and how biodiversity can help us tackle climate change and many different issues like that. You know, there's also talks of market tools to support biodiversity. You know, how we can have indicators to support adaptation and climate change for food systems. But what our policymakers often forget on the even on the topmost scale in the highest platform is we fail to recognize who is carrying the burden of this transition. I think that conversation is not mainstream at all. Even myself in the policy spaces, we talk about agroecology, we talk about sustainable food systems transition, but we fail to emphasize that the burden of this transition is actually carried by women on farms. If you go to rural landscapes, and I think this is common across South Asia and Southeast Asia as well, we are seeing a large labor problem in agriculture. We're also seeing that men are migrating from rural areas to peri-urban and urban areas in search for more informal work and going into the services industry from the farming industry. So this is leaving behind women to take care of agriculture in rural India, which they have been doing for centuries now, because women are the backbone of agriculture across the globe. So women also carry culture with them. Women also carry diversification with them. And women also are responsible for shaping food system landscape in rural India. But when policies are formed, when food systems transformation is coming into play on a national and international level, we have to realize that it is coming out of a woman's time, right? We often talk about having a colorful plate, but have we ever counted the amount of hours a woman has to spend to make sure that the plate is colorful, right? So if maybe it takes an hour out of her time every single day to prepare food for her child, but maybe this call for diversification, if not done right, in a sustainable, in a societal manner, can maybe take 2 hours of her time, which might be fine in an urban context, but this the same woman now has to go to the farm to work on the farm, to manage the farm, to also work as a labor on that farm, to navigate with a complex web of private stakeholders, credit providers or loan sharks, and market for or people who in the market to negotiate the price, because smallholder farmers have very little negotiating ability. So and women in this space are often discriminated or not given the space to really get the best out of their produce. So what we are really seeing is every policy that is coming out, a woman has to take the burden and also has to make it successful. in a way that all the policies that have been successful are because of these women, right? So that is something we need to consider because it is leading to time poverty in a woman's life, right? And we need to make sure that all the women farmers are empowered for to really transform food systems in a sustainable manner, and for this to also expand to cities, urban centers, and different areas where farming is now coming up. So this is something that needs to be considered urgently, and we also need to build policies that empower women in a real sense, not just on paper. And let me tell you that this can be as simple as giving her a mobile phone with internet, or even if they have a mobile phone, giving them a recharge for internet. You won't believe a recharge of less than of half a US dollar can go a long way in communicating, providing digital advisory support, can also help them communicate their health and well-being of their child by talking to the schools or by talking to the research organizations that are supporting them, or calling the market and finding out. So a simple half US dollar research is giving so much foresight and planning, which can save her time as well, keep her safe as well, and also help to transform food systems in a real sense. And coming to something domestic in the policy space, I think we often create big programs and forget about it. So 2023 was International Year of the Millets. A great push by the world to promote millets. But again, we did not provide the enabling ecosystem to farmers in the form of good subsidies, in the form of assured procurement price, in the form of processing, common shared processing plants, because some millets require dehulling. They need to be soaked to be able to be palatable and be consumer friendly. So I think on a farmer level that push is still lacking. Maybe on a consumer level we have a lot of grants coming up, a lot of support for that, so for small entrepreneurs, so that's wonderful. But I think on a small farmer level, on a more traditional market sense, where you're producing, going to procurement markets and selling, I think a push over there would really help to again rekindle that interest. So I think this is how the policy space is looking right now, and what we need to, the lens we need to have to make sure the future is inclusive and sustainable.
Thank you, Imran. And I super agree with all the points that you mentioned. I feel like you did an impressive job humanizing the work that has been done in our farms, especially looking at it through a lens of gender. Because usually when we think about the domestic labor that comes into, putting food on the table, we never, or we rarely look past the act of cooking in the house. We don't really extend that image into the farms and the labor that women have to do on these farms. And in the policy spaces, exactly, I feel like women should also get an equal space to be able to advocate for their own concerns when it comes to the challenges that they have with labor. Thank you so much for your answer. Let's move then to Temtem. So, based on your perspective, how does celebrating plant-based culinary heritage contribute not only to sustainability, but also to nutrition and food sovereignty? And I know that this is going to be like a very interesting question for me, because as someone who has also studied Asian food cultures, it is not super out of this world to hear that Asia has a very diverse plant-based culinary heritage. It's just that nowadays it's not as common as it used to be. So I'm very curious to hear your answer here.
Yeah, so the thing about my contents, which happen to be all vegan and plant-based, is that I am actually not trying to promote veganism or plant-based diet to like everyone who's seeing it. Although I am actually trying to promote, vegetables, to eat more fibers. Because in reality, actually 98%, well, in Indonesian context, 98% of adults in Indonesia are actually lacking fiber consumptions, where it sits at 25 grams per day, but our average daily intakes is actually as at 5.7 grams per day. This is far below what's required, and it's ironic knowing Indonesia is a mega diverse country in terms of food biodiversity. And for comparison, like North America sits at 17 grams a day, Europe's at 21 grams a day. And even if our neighbor Malaysia is at 15 grams a day. I find these numbers to be incredibly ironic and sad, knowing that we are a, like a big country with like super diverse forests and other biomes. Like it is incredibly ironic. And to me, this shows that the problem is not availability, but disconnection. Celebrating plant-based culinary heritage helps reconnect people to the kinds of foods that once made up everyday diets, like leafy greens, stems, legumes, tubers, and grains, what naturally provide fiber and nutrients. And when these foods are framed as heritage rather than health trends, they feel familiar and accessible and not restrictive at all. This is where sustainability and food sovereignty come in, I think. By valuing local plant-based traditions, communities rely less on import staples and monocultures and more on what they own land can grow. And in practice, this makes eating healthier not just a personal choice, but a collective, culturally rooted act that supports biodiversity. And yeah, I don't find any like the plant-based lifestyle or vegan lifestyle to be a very, exclusive and hierarchical lifestyle. Like it is, I think it is very, very humble and very, very cheap as well. I mean, it is obvious, isn't it? Like, but like today, the modern days has just made the lifestyle like become like this only exclusively for the upper class. And so that's what I'm trying to like tackle. And it's ironic. And I think, I see plant-based lifestyle as a very humble lifestyle.
Thanks so much, Tam Tam. And yeah, I agree. There's a um when it comes to veganism, sometimes what people think is, this push for like superfoods,
Yeah.
or, like these trendy lifestyles that you see all the time online. And again, what I appreciate about the work that you do is that, these ingredients, whether you're in Indonesia or in India or the Philippines or anywhere else in the world, if you go to your local markets, these vegetables are super accessible. These foods are being eaten by people from the communities. These are grown by them. And this disconnect that you mentioned, this unfamiliarity with, with the people who are farming your food eat on a daily basis is something that I find super unfortunate and something that I feel like you're doing an amazing job in helping bring back to the table. And I
Thank
hope that more people from different cultures and, different cultures, especially in Asia, can revisit back into our roots.
Yeah.
Unfor Unfortunately, we are at our last question, and we will be concluding the session today. So, as a conclusion to this beautiful conversation, I have one last question to the both of you. And of course, to the audience joining us online, you can write your comments or responses in the chat. So, to both of you, if you imagine the future of food in Asia or in your own country, what does it look like? Who is centered? What values guide it? How does it feel to grow, share, cook, and eat within it? And what kind of relationships does it make possible between people, land, and more than human life? And let's start with Imran.
I think I would like to start with saying, when Asia is nourished, the world is fed. Because food security in Asia is not just regional; it brings global stability. Because somewhere the world relies on us for diversity of food also, and the quality and availability of food as well. So the future, which I think should start tomorrow and now, as soon as possible, is our food system should be community led. They should be cooperative driven by farmers, cooperative forming collectives, self-help groups, and women being an active, playing an active role in this. And I think we should bring back food systems that are rooted in care. So we no longer want to grow for a company or a market, but rather to keep the culture and food supply alive while also keeping it practical by getting good livelihood to farmers. I think that's very important to discuss in the context of food, that at the end of the day, farmers are providing us food for livelihood as well. So the right kind of equitable livelihood is very important. And we need to really share create this web through, like, let's say the work that Tam is doing to mainstreaming the kind of traditional knowledge, the accessibility of food culture, and not keeping it behind paywalls or keeping it behind, inaccessibility. Because the reason why communities consume food comes from a long history, sometimes from colonization, sometimes from exploitations, and sometimes uh, from survival. So, respecting and providing dignity to food culture is something we have lost and we need to bring back. And we need to have a world where there are multiple pockets of food cultures, and food systems, localized supply chains. So, we don't really have to wait for a ship to arrive to give us food, but rather just wait for a farmer to come and drop off on his bicycle. I think that's the kind of system we had once, and I think we can still do it at scale with the right kind of policy support, right kind of finance, and making sure that the dignity is still alive in farming, because I think that is going to play a crucial role in keeping this alive. Because if the dignity in farming is gone and we lose our farmers, then we are very quickly going to eat lab grown food, maybe, or food grown in industries. And I think that is not good for our children or for the future of Asia, because I think the diversity that we bring and the knowledge that we bring is our strength. And if you trace back the science of plant breeding and genetics is also very deeply rooted in food coming out of Asia, and especially Southeast Asia. So I think we need to keep all of these things alive, to keep the science, the economics, the social aspects of it nourishing and alive as well.
That's super beautiful, Imran. And I want to take away a quote from what you just mentioned, and that is to bring back food systems that are rooted in care, because I feel like at the core of it, this is what we truly have to bring forward into making a better food future for Asia. Tam Tam, I will pass the mic to you now. What do you think?
Yeah, that was really beautiful, Imran. And also, my answer would also be pretty similar to yours. I'm actually trying to quote my bio in TikTok, which is only available in the TikTok platform, which actually is the right answer for this question. And that is, the future of food system is decolonized, re-rooted, and flavor is defined beyond taste buds. I actually like that statement. I made that, and I think that's the one thing that I learned from being vegan for 5 years. I'm vegetarian now, but I was vegan for 5 years. And what I learned most about being vegan is that I become dependent on what's available, you know? Like I don't make lots of demands towards the market. And I am defined to what's available in front of me. And I think I like that perspective. So I'm saying flavor is defined beyond taste buds. Like the future of food system, I think, cannot be more as demanding as it is now. Yeah. I think we're very, over consumerism is a thing, and it is a big thing, and it is like the main thing that we need to tackle in terms of, and we're talking about an unsustainable food system, and it is a huge problem. And so I think the future of food system is, yeah, we need to to ask less, I think, and more appreciate of what's in front of us. And I'm mainly talking about the people that are consuming these. Um I'm not talking about the people who are well, in most rural areas, because they're the ones who are doing it now. Like this perspective is what their perspective is now. I'm mostly talking about the people who has many access to the market and to the traditional markets and the supermarkets, mainly in the cities. And yeah, I think that will be my answer. And also the first point is decolonized. I do not like the products that we have that was born out of colonization. And for example, like milk and wheat is something, two of the things that are really, really everywhere in Indonesia and also in the Philippines. We have the same problem with milk and wheat. I think it's taking over our rice, which is also something that is not really rooted in our culture. But even to that point, yeah, we're far off from our roots, I think. And yeah, I think that would be my answer for the future of food system.
Thank you so much, Tum Tum. And you heard it straight from him. Decolonize your eating habits. And the flavor is not just defined by your taste buds. Thank you so much. So as we come to the end of the session, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've explored together. And that is looking at food systems through a lens of people, gender, culinary heritage, history. And what I would like to ask you, dear audiences, as we end the session, the next time you look at the food on your plate, consider this. How did your food arrive there, past the rice cooker, past the stove? And whose hands worked to keep you nourished and fed? And what histories are kept alive through it? Thank you so much to our speakers for sharing your insights, experiences, and grounded wisdom. And thank you to everyone who joined us today, offline or online. Your presence and your curiosity are what make these conversations meaningful. Please stay tuned for the next session of the Community and Action Asia Digital Week, where we'll continue to explore collective futures rooted in care, justice, and regeneration. Let's keep our hopes rooted in action. In case you'd like to go back to any of these week sessions, all the recordings will be available online through the link in the video's description. See you next time.
Bagi kami, hutan adalah jantung kehidupan dan identitas kami sebagai masyarakat adat Dayak. Kami memiliki ikatan yang sangat erat dengan hutan yang tercermin di dalam cara hidup, tradisi, dan kepercayaan. Hutan adalah sumber makanan, sumber obat-obatan, sumber mata pencaharian, dan tempat tinggal bagi kami. Tidak hanya itu saja, hutan juga merupakan tempat di mana kisah-kisah nenek moyang kami disimpan. Nama saya Roro Aregarini, saya dari Ranwelung Foundation. Saya juga bagian dari JLFX Kalimantan. Kami adalah orang biasa yang menolak untuk tidak melakukan apa-apa. Bagi kami, inilah saatnya bagi kaum muda untuk kembali ke akar dan menggunakan kekuatan mereka untuk membangun komunitas dan mengambil tindakan sebagai bagian dari solusi. Oke, selamat pagi teman-teman semua. Kami memiliki pergerakan bernama The Heartland Project, di mana gerakan ini adalah gerakan kolektif untuk menanam pohon. Kita perlu menyadari bahwa hutan bukan hanya sumber daya yang bisa dieksploitasi, tetapi juga bagian integral dari kehidupan kita. Melindungi hutan berarti melindungi keanekaragaman hayati, iklim, dan keberlanjutan masa depan. Iyalah, banyak airnya. Mari kita berkomitmen untuk menggunakan sumber daya alam secara bijaksana dan mendukung praktek yang ramah lingkungan agar generasi mendatang dapat menikmati manfaat hutan yang sama. Hutan untuk kehidupan dan kita semua memiliki tanggung jawab yang sama untuk menjaganya.